11 players, one list, and the first name on it is the one man in golf nobody expected to see there. Something just happened inside the PGA Tour that the sport has never seen before, not during LEV, not during the pandemic negotiations, not ever. 11 of the biggest names in the game looked at their own CEO and said no. Not a tweet, not a quote to a reporter, a signed, joint refusal with the threat of a courtroom fight attached to it. Here's what should stop you cold. This isn't a group of disgruntled journeymen with nothing to lose. This is the world number one. This is a 5-time major champion. This is the guy who spent a decade being the tour's peacemaker. The one player who always sides with the front office. Until now. So what could get that specific group of men to risk their careers, their sponsors, their entire relationship with the tour that pays them, all at once, all on the same page? It comes down to one decision, from a CEO who's never run a golf tour in his life. And the man leading this revolt had just been handed a favor nobody else on tour received. So why is he the one leading the charge against the man who did him that favor? That contradiction is where this story actually starts. Brian Rolapp didn't come from golf. He came from the NFL, where he spent years running media rights and squeezing broadcast partners for every dollar the league could get. He's brilliant at packaging a sport for television. But football and golf aren't the same animal. In the NFL, the league owns the schedule and the players show up. Golf has never worked that way. For decades, the tour has functioned more like a co-op, where the players are the product and have always had real influence over how their own season gets built. Rolapp didn't seem to see it that way. What he did next tells you exactly how he views the players he now runs. Field sizes shrank first. Tournaments that used to carry 156 players dropped to 144, then smaller. If you weren't paying close attention, this looked like housekeeping. It wasn't. The real number landed months later. Fully exempt tour cards cut from 125 down to 100. 25 players who thought they had a guaranteed job suddenly didn't. The tour called it a pace of play fix. Almost nobody in the locker room bought it. Trimming a quarter of the field doesn't meaningfully speed up a round, and the players knew what it actually did. Concentrate money and airtime around a smaller circle of stars. 25 careers, zeroed out, to tighten the product for broadcast. That should have been the story. It wasn't even close to the biggest one. In March, Rolapp laid out the full vision, and it was bigger than anyone expected. Signature events doubling from 8 to 16. A 2-tier promotion and relegation system. The season shifted earlier, a rotating tour championship, and buried in the middle, a new international postseason series. Mandatory, no opt-out. Every top player required to fly overseas and play, whether they wanted to or not. That single sentence lit the fuse. Right around the time the tour was stripping cards from 25 players at the bottom, it was bending the rules for the players at the top. Rory McIlroy had played fewer tournaments than the tour's own minimum requirement and got waved through anyway, under what the tour framed as an international player exemption. Scottie Scheffler got the same treatment. Neither man asked to become a symbol. But sitting next to 25 guys who'd just lost their livelihoods with zero flexibility, that's exactly what they became. The unspoken message inside the locker room. Some players matter more than others. Hold on to that. It's about to explain something that looks, on the surface, impossible. Then came the mandatory international postseason itself. And this is where quiet frustration turned into open rebellion. On paper, it looked clean. A 4-event series across 4 countries after the Tour Championship sold as global growth. What the players heard was different. Mandatory travel eating into what was supposed to be their off-season, on top of a schedule that already has them on the road roughly 30 weeks a year, hopping time zones, climates, and grass types. Less recovery, less family time, more injury risk. And, among veterans who'd burned out once already, more risk of players simply walking away from the game. It landed on top of a playoff format players already considered broken, one where a player can dominate an entire season, win a major, and still lose life-changing money over 3 bad weeks at the end. Adding more mandatory events on top of that didn't read as competition. It read as the tour chasing every dollar the calendar could produce. You'd expect this story to end with a few angry tweets. It didn't. Late-night calls, tournament week conversations that had nothing to do with golf. This is where it actually started. Players compared notes on what the series would cost them, physically, financially, in time with the people waiting at home. At some point, 11 of them decided talking wasn't enough. They signed a joint statement refusing to participate, with a legal challenge on the table if the tour tried to force it. Rory McIlroy is the first name, and it's the one that matters most. He's the player who'd just been quietly given a scheduling exemption, the tour's longtime diplomat, the one who smooths things over. If McIlroy wouldn't defend this plan, the plan had already failed before it started. Scottie Scheffler is the second and arguably the bigger problem for Rolapp. If the best player in the world won't back your reform publicly, how do you sell it to the other 199 players in the field? 9 more names follow, each adding a different kind of weight. A veteran who'd been warning about exactly this for months, lending the group credibility star power alone can't buy. A major champion whose signature gave the statement international reach. A player who'd never been shy about criticizing the tour, now backing words with action. A 5-time major winner who'd already survived one brutal comeback from LIV, with little left to lose. A LIV standout, meaning tour loyalists and LIV defectors, longtime rivals, were suddenly aligned against the same target. A player reportedly already in talks to rejoin the tour, willing to fight the terms before he was even back through the door. A signature that made clear this wasn't just an American grievance. One more major title on a list rapidly running out of ways to be dismissed as fringe. And a legend near the end of his career, barely playing a full schedule, who signed anyway, not because the postseason would affect him personally, but as a statement that even players on the edges of the sport still consider themselves part of its family. 11 names, 11 different careers. One shared conclusion: they were done being told what their sport would look like instead of being asked. Here's the part that turns this from a labor dispute into something closer to a financial crisis for the tour. And it's the piece that changes everything about how this ends. Broadcast contracts are built on projected fields. Networks pay premium rates specifically because they're guaranteed a certain density of star power across a season, including the postseason window. A mandatory international series wasn't just a scheduling decision, it was collateral the tour was counting on to justify the value of a media deal Rolapp himself helped shape before he ever ran the tour. If the top 11 players simply don't board those flights, the international leg doesn't just look weaker. It becomes very hard to sell to the broadcast partners who signed off on it assuming those exact players would be there. Rolapp built this trap without realizing it. He came from the media rights side of sports, where the deal gets signed first and the product gets assembled to match it. Golf doesn't work that way. The product walks off the tee whenever it wants to. Right now, 11 of the sport's biggest draws have made it clear they're willing to let a broadcast obligation collapse rather than accept a schedule they had no say in building. This isn't a player's revolt anymore. It's a direct threat to the exact revenue model Rolapp was hired to protect. The tour's public response has followed the same script all year. Statements about listening, about compromise, about working together. Players have heard that language before, when the fields got cut, when the tour cards got slashed, when the mandatory postseason was first unveiled. Every time the tour did what it wanted anyway. This time the players are betting that won't happen again. Rolapp has 2 options left, and neither one is comfortable. He can negotiate, which means publicly walking back a plan he unveiled with total confidence just months ago. Or he can dig in and risk a confrontation that could fracture the tour at the exact moment he's trying to remake it. He came from a league built on players falling in line without question. Golf was never built that way, and 11 of its biggest names just proved it. In public, on the record, with their own careers on the line. Nobody knows yet how this ends. The mandatory international postseason might survive in some quietly rewritten form, or it might collapse entirely under its own weight. What's already certain is this. For years, the decisions shaping professional golf were made in boardrooms, far from the people who actually play it. 11 players just made sure that can't happen quietly again. 11 players stood up. 11 players said enough. And whatever Rolapp decides next, he's no longer deciding it alone.